Neue Aufnahme starten.
Was soll ich bloß mit der hier anfangen, Aphrodite? Sie hält einfach nicht still. Ich will doch, dass sie schön werden, aber es gelingt mir nie. Die hier, zu fett, die zu groß, jene, zu symmetrisch. Und das da? Was ist das, meine Göttin? Ein Eindringling. Er ist hässlich. Hässlich. Hässlich! Hässlich! Sieh dich an! Widerlich!
Ich glaube, das war unser erster Boss. Dr. Steinman besiegt. Notschlüssel.
Oder auch langsam Zeit, dass sich jemand um diesen kranken Mistkerl kümmert. Vergiss Steinmans Schlüssel nicht und mach dich auf den Weg zurück zum Notzugang. Ich mache mich auf den Weg zur Rückseite von Port Neptune. Wir schaffen es noch rechtzeitig.
Oh, Panzergeschosse sind sehr gut gegen Big Daddies. Da habe ich so das Gefühl, dass wir noch gegen die kämpfen müssen. Ich möchte aber nicht. Das ist Verbandskasten. Den sollten wir relativ easy gehackt kriegen. Das ist der falsche. Den machen wir direkt mal nach unten. Ich möchte natürlich keinen auf der passenden Seite, ne? So, jetzt aber. Patronen. Sagt man so schön mal eine Patrone, zweite Patrone. Ja, das Flammending habe ich jetzt komischerweise nicht mehr. Kann ich das nochmal auswählen? Anscheinend nicht. Ja. Patrone.
Die Naht hätten wir und...
Muss mal eben die Sprachlautstärke herstellen. Ich habe das Gefühl, dass die zu leise ist.
Die Nase ist hervorragend gelungen, Dr. Steinman. Doktor?
Wissen Sie, wenn ich Sie jetzt so ansehe, ich habe gar nicht bemerkt, wie in Ihrem Gesicht alles hängt. Skalpell!
Wie bitte?
Skalpell!
Doktor, ein Lifting ist bei ihr nicht vorgesehen.
Wir schneiden nur hier ein wenig ein und...
Doktor, hören Sie auf zu schneiden. Doktor, Doktor, hören Sie auf zu schneiden. Holen Sie den Leiter der Chirurgie, den Chef der Chirurgie, schnell!
Ja, bleib doch mal hier, Dingen. Ich will dich doch hacken, mein Freund. Ich will dich doch behalten. Oh, von wo kommt das denn? Ach, von da oben kommt das. Scheiße, jetzt habe ich natürlich nicht aufgepasst, ne? So, nach unten, dadurch, dadurch, dadurch. Fuck, falsche. Wo ist denn das gerade Ding da? So, jetzt habe ich wenigstens einen auf meiner Seite. Das war jetzt Reaktion, weil die sich bewegt hat. Ich kann nichts dafür. Kein Loot, deswegen hast du noch auf die Schnauze gekriegt.
Willkommen im Zirkus der Werte.
Scheiße.
Hört sich an, als ob da wieder ein Tunnel einstürzt. Willkommen in Rapture, dem am schnellsten wachsenden Schrotthaufen der Welt.
Was war das jetzt? Speichern nochmal. Boah, ich bin halt ein Schisser, ich kann nichts dafür. Oh fuck.
Eine Little Sister. Das ist die Gelegenheit für dich, an etwas Adam zu kommen.
Ja, wie denn? Wie soll ich denn da reinkommen?
Halte dich von ihr fern, oder du bekommst die nächste Kugel ab.
Ganz ruhig, Doktor. Er ist nur auf der Suche nach etwas Adam. Nur genug, um durchzuhalten.
Ich lasse nicht zu, dass er meinen Kleinen etwas antut.
Ist schon in Ordnung, Kumpel. Das ist kein Kind, zumindest jetzt nicht mehr. Dr. Tennenbaum hat dafür gesorgt.
Bitte tu ihr nicht weh. Hast du kein Herz?
Tja, nette Predigt von dem skrupellosen Monster, das diese Kreaturen überhaupt erst erschaffen hat. Sie haben diese kleinen Mädchen doch in das verwandelt, was sie sind, oder etwa nicht? Hör gut zu, mein Junge. Ohne das Adam, das diese Dinger bei sich tragen, wirst du es nicht schaffen. Du musst dich entscheiden. Wer soll überleben? Du, meine Frau und mein Kind? Oder diese Mini-Frankensteins von Tennenbaum?
Hier. Es gibt noch einen anderen Weg. Nimm das hier und befreie sie von ihrer Qual. Vertrau mir, ich sorge dafür, dass es sich auch für dich lohnt. Irgendwie.
Okay, jetzt kann ich nicht helfen. Irgendwie ist das beängstigend, ein kleines Kind mit einer Waffe zu bedrohen.
Nein! 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 Nein!
Oh nein, sie wird gestreichelt und sie mag es nicht. Oh, die coole Augen.
Du hast mich gerettet.
Der Weg der Gerechten ist nicht immer der einfachste, verstehst du? Aber du wirst den Lohn dafür erhalten.
Ja, kann mir mal einer sagen, was sie da tut?
Tennenbaum hält dich zum Narren. Diese Dinger sehen zwar aus wie kleine Mädchen, aber das ist auch schon alles. Um zu überleben, brauchst du so viel Adam, wie du kriegen kannst.
Euer Bettchen, Mr. B.
Wenn du wieder mal auf so einen Gatherers Garden-Automat stößt, nimm auf jeden Fall wieder 1 oder 2 Plasmide mit. Aber natürlich nur, wenn der Preis dafür nicht zu hoch ist.
Alter, wo kommen die denn jetzt her? Gesundheitsupgrade. Ah, geil. Körperpanzerung. Ach, schade, dafür brauche ich 80. Schade. Und wie kann ich denn das eine erhöhen? Muss ich bestimmt irgendwas finden, wa? Kann ich das irgendwie tauschen? Gibt es da irgendwie eine Menütaste für? Mal kurz gucken, Tastaturbelegung. Steuerung anpassen. Nö, kann ich hier nicht. Okay, was war das für ein B und? Drück gerade die F-Tasten durch. Ich weiß aber nicht, auf was passiert. Okay, das war, glaube ich. Okay, F9 ist schnell speichern. Habe ich das auch schon mal rausgefunden? Nein, meine Daten werden gerade geladen. Okay. Ich guck nochmal, F9 ist laden, also nicht speichern. Und F10 ist speichern. Nein, doch, wäre gespeichert. Okay, F10 ist schnell speichern. Und wie kann ich das hier ins Slot legen? Wie kann ich die denn tauschen? Also mehr Gesundheit wäre natürlich auch nicht schlecht. Okay, ich kann beides nicht mitnehmen. Oh, mein Begleiter ist wieder weg. Ach, nee, da ist doch noch einer. Objekte kaufen. Pistolenkugeln? Nee, die will ich gar nicht kaufen. Ich wollte gucken, ob ich mir irgendwie Sätze kaufen kann.
Du bist nun soweit. Zeit für dich, es mit einem der Big Daddies aufzunehmen.
Oh, what?
Es wird kein Zucker schlecken. Aber nur so kommst du an die Little Sisters ran. Und an das Adam, das sie bei sich tragen.
Das habe ich nicht gelesen. Fuck. Muss in meinem Laden. Ich will den Text doch sehen. Ich wollte eigentlich schnell speichern. Gegen den Big Daddy? Alter, euer Ernst? Ich habe Panik. Die Dinger sind Monster.
Diese kleinen Mädchen sind nicht nur echte Adam-Fabriken, sie sind auch nahezu unzerstörbar. Sie heilen ihre Wunden, indem sie mit Hilfe von Stammzellreserven neues Gewebe herstellen. Sie unterhalten eine symbiotische Beziehung zu den ihnen implantierten Schnecken. Wenn man die Schnecke entfernt, stirbt der Wirt. Wie du siehst, hat das nichts mit Mord zu tun, sagte Tennenbaum. Es ist eher so, als würde man bei einem Koma-Patienten die Beatmung einstellen.
BioShock was groundbreaking in many regards when it released in 2007, though fundamentally it shared many consistencies with Irrational's System Shock series. What elements of System Shock translated into BioShock, and what was refined, altered, and innovated upon to create the world of Rapture? Let's take a look at the long road from System Shock to BioShock. Everyone knows where the game ended up, but I think fans would be interested to
Okay.
learn where
Das ist
this
mitten im Spiel?
game or the idea of
Die Qualität ist aber sehr schlecht.
started.
Das ist sehr
And I think,
verpixelt, das
you know,
Video.
folks know
Vor allem
System Shock and the
die
legacy
Kurzen
of
im
that game,
Hintergrund.
huge fan base. Did this game, did it start as a System Shock game initially?
No, I mean, because
Okay.
we didn't have the
Rights?
rights to that,
Yeah.
right? We kind of felt that there was more game design to mine there. You know, that it was sort of, we did that one game, and it was sort of the first game that really combined shooting and RPG. And it was a very small budget. You know, it was a very small team, and it was the first game we had ever done. So we got pretty lucky, I think, in terms of how well it came out. But you know, but the odds were sort of stacked against it. And the team, you know, was really enthusiastic about doing a game like that. You know, and time had evolved, and the team was much more, we had done a bunch of games together, and we were, you know, we had a stable technology base, and we were like, okay, well, which System Shock 2 was not. I mean, that engine, no game had ever shipped on that engine. It was a very crude piece of technology. Most of us had never shipped a game at the time. So like, well, what if we had a stable technology base, and we had a team that was more experienced and more seasoned, and we had, you know, an actual, like, art director, and, you know, which we didn't really have on System Shock 2. You know, what could we do? And so I think there was a lot of enthusiasm in the team to really try to do a more mature version of that kind of game. You know, this is before we had sold the company to Take-Two, and we were an independent developer, right? We were sitting there, we were using the money we made from other development deals we had, and we would try to scrape together whatever time and money we had to work on this thing. And it was not actually something I was particularly keen on doing. The team was much more keen on doing a sort of a System Shock-ish game than I was, because...
That's your pitching, right? Like System Shock 3 at one point, right?
Well, I mean, there was an actual System Shock 3 that we were pitching back in the day when we were right after System Shock 2, but that never happened. Right, we couldn't get anybody interested, because System Shock 2 sold like 5 copies, right? And so as the business guy, the guy who had to not only just sort of write the content, but the guy who had to go out and get the deals and pay everybody, I wasn't particularly excited about doing this, because it was very disappointing when we did System Shock 2 and nobody bought it. You know, it got great reviews, it got these insane reviews, but it left us in a place where it didn't really move the needle for us in terms of making payroll. So I wasn't super excited about it, because I didn't see I didn't see a publisher be interested in it, and I didn't see the audience actually be particularly interested in this kind of game. And it was really the team who convinced me to invest in this, because their enthusiasm, I think a lot of them came to the studio because of System Shock 2. And so finally they sort of battered me down, and it's good they did, because I was not the first fan of doing this.
And I know initially there was something called the Serene Dawn. That was a spaceship? Or what was that?
No, that was
the name of a cult, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, okay.
That one's, I think, been lost to the... If I remember correctly, Serene Dawn was a cult. You were playing as a deprogrammer that was infiltrating the cult, and your name happened to be Carlos Coelho, who was one of our programmers at the time.
It's named after him, yeah. Then there was a story notion that I always really found interesting, which was that you have these cults, and you have sometimes people who they're these sort of characters who are really live on the edge of the gray morality, which is these guys who come in and essentially kidnap people out of these cults or rescue them, depending on how you look at it. Because what it really is, from a functional standpoint, it's a kidnapping, right? You're coming to an adult and you're saying, you know, you're hired by their parents or whoever, and this was in the story, it was like a senator whose daughter joined one of these religious movements called the Serene Dawn, you said?
Yeah,
Serene Dawn. And I always thought that was a really interesting tension of this hero who's basically a kidnapper, and taking a young woman against her will out of the place that she was in. Now, you could also make the other argument that, well, she was not really there by her will. But there's a really interesting conversation that goes on there. I think there was actually a Kate Winslet movie, a Harvey Keitel, Kate Winslet movie, which dealt with a similar theme. Because usually you hear that story, you know, these deprogrammers as a sort of heroic kind of notion, but I always thought that, well, there's something interesting about agency going on there, and about are people entitled to make bad mistakes, or is it a bad mistake? It all depends on the person. And I'm not a fan of religious cults or religion in general, but there seemed to be an interesting discussion of freedom there and independent decision making. And I thought that idea was cool, and that was sort of the basis of it for a while. But it was really mostly for the purpose of, we needed something to go out and pitch to publishers, and so we didn't have a ton of time to really develop it. So that sounded like, all right, this will do for now.
And was that pre-Underwater City? I mean, this was just like an idea for a story.
We may have stepped away from that to do the cult thing, but then we went back to the underwater.
No, we had that one room, remember?
We had the one World War II room with the roaches on the ground and like these weird test tube things that you could walk around. I don't know where that fell. It could have been underwater. There was no windows.
The thing is, we were a small business, right? And we were trying to figure out a way to sell this thing with spending the least amount of money, because we didn't have any money. We didn't have a pot to piss in. So we would do this demo. That was one room basically, just to show. And I'd write up a document, and we take it around. I fly around the country, be like, here's our room. It was a different time, you know. And
we had just come off of SWAT 4. One of the advantages we had is that we were so familiar with that engine at that point that we could really start cranking through, you know, small rooms and lighting and making things look good. So
I took it on the road to sell it to somebody, and nobody cared. We'd go to a publisher, and look, they have to make money, right? And we'd say, and we say, oh, it's sort of a spiritual successor to System Shock 2, and they'd be like, well, how did that sell? And I'd be like, my mom likes it, you know. And they would be like, well, we can't, you know. And usually we'd be talking to a fan. A lot of executives, like sort of junior executives, were fans of System Shock, and they'd go to their boss and they'd be super excited, and their boss would open up, you know, their Excel spreadsheet and be like, no, we can't do this. And I think the pitch probably evolved as we kept trying different permutations trying to sell, but we're also out there trying to sell like 2 or 3 other things at the time. We had a pitch for a game called Monster Island, and
well, our SWAT 5 pitch was
Zombie SWAT.
Yeah, we had just come off of SWAT 4, which is like hardcore tactical, and we decided they wanted us to do another SWAT, and we didn't really want to do another hardcore tactical game, so we're like, what if we added zombies to SWAT? Like, you're a SWAT team that fights zombies and werewolves. That sounds awesome. And it was like, no, it doesn't.
And this is before, this is like before zombies were a thing.
Yeah.
And so we came up with this thing called Division 9.
Division 9, yeah.
That probably would have been even a bigger financial success than BioShock.
Wow.
But we couldn't get anybody interested in it.
We didn't have enough werewolves in the demo, I think.
We had 0 werewolves in the demo. Yeah, we were going to have werewolves, weren't we?
Werewolves and vampires. So it was
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Werewolves,
the whole,
vampires,
like,
zombies?
just throw it all the Universal Studios monsters from like...
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what happened was we couldn't sell it, but we were always sort of independent-minded. And so I said, well, what if we sort of did this in reverse? Instead of getting a publisher first and then doing a press tour on it, what if we sort of did the press first?
Yeah.
And we called up a guy, Andrew Park, who's at GameSpot at the time, who was a fan of System Shock 2 and a great guy. And I said, well, will you come out and look at this thing we're doing and write a story on it? And he's like, sure. And Andrew flew out, and we showed him what we had, which is this very, you know, very rudimentary thing about an underwater base. And he wrote up an article and sort of featured as like, this is the spiritual successor to System Shock 2. And the next day, the phone started ringing from publishers who now all of a sudden saw the article was getting all this pickup and all these comments, and people were excited. And that really, I think, put it over the top in terms of being able to sell it, even though it was not BioShock at that point. It was called BioShock, but it was not BioShock. There would have been I don't think there would have been a game. We never would have sold it without Andrew coming out doing that.
My belly's full of angels.